Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is @ThePaddyPower, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather, or the gym.
Hello and welcome to this Monday Postcast. I'm Maddie Plale, joined in the studio by James Hill, as well as Tom Siegel and Neil Ryan from Paddy Power as well. We've got a lot of things to cover. It's been an amazing weekend full of racing. But first off, starting with the sad news with the retirements of Saxa Moria and Alpha Centauri. I'll begin with the filly and say a classic winner, 4-time Group 1 winner, that staggering Coronation Stakes victory, Jimmy. Just how good was she?
Right up with some of the best fillies I've seen, Mads. I'd say there have been very few performances I've seen better from fillies than when she won the Coronation Stakes at Ascot. That was electric. She was very good on her day, I think, particularly on fast ground. And it's a great shame that we won't be seeing her again, because she's one of the few horses that has lit up this season. It
is, and she was going to come back in training next year as well. Tom, you know, I know you weren't massively keen on the Breeders' Cup, but what she achieved this season was pretty remarkable, wasn't it?
She's absolutely brilliant, Maddie. It's such a shame to see her bow out the way she did. It was quite clear from the half a furlong out that something wasn't right, I thought, and she's just exceptional. I don't think I've seen a better miling filly for a good few years now. I thought she was just different. That was the thing. She just did things so easily. She had a brilliant cruising speed, brilliant acceleration. She's just different, and when you get those horses that are different, they stand out, and she stood out.
And versatile too, regarding, you know, where she needed to be positioned in a race, to
so
tactics and everything like that. Yeah, she was good.
When you're that good, you can go where you like, you can do what you like. It's like watching Messi play football or any of those other things. They're just better than the rest, and she could have done what she wanted. She could set what she want, lead, back, front, whatever. Just better than the rest, simple as that.
And Neil, a real blow for Jessie Harrington and her team, because she was such a star.
Yeah, she took Jessie to heights she hadn't seen before. She put it in her own words, as you talked about her versatility. All the top trainers say about the top horses, you can put them anywhere in a race and they just make it easy for the jockey. You could see her when she made the wrong step, if you look back in the replay, and she kind of leaned into the horse in front. But now it is sad to see. Actually, kind of on a note to that, I was just reading Jerry Lyon's blog piece. He actually withdrew 4 horses on the day due to the final 2 furlongs being like a road, as he said. So this might be something to take into reckoning there with Saxon Warrior's injury as well, that maybe the ground was just a little firm on the last 2 furlongs.
Yeah, you mentioned Saxa Moria. On to him next. Dubbed as a Triple Crown contender when he won the Guineas so impressively. Sort of changed trip a few times since then, and things didn't really go to plan, Jimmy. But again, at his best, a 2-year-old trophy winner last year as well. He was a proper horse.
Yeah, very good 2-year-old last year, and he continued it in the 2000 Guineas. He was very impressive that day. I think we all thought he was going to win the Derby. Whether it was a trip or the course, I'm not sure. He just didn't fire that day at all, and things just hadn't gone right for him since he came back sick from the eclipse, and he was probably just coming back from that when he was beaten in the Juddmonte. So he ran really well on Saturday, so it's a great shame that he got injured.
Tom, more of those 2 Irish races later on. We don't want to take too much away from the winners of them either, but it does take 2 horses to make a race, and Saxa Moria, I thought he was ridden brilliantly on the weekend.
Oh, they got the tactics spot on, didn't they? Whether you agree with it or not is a different matter, but they did everything in their power to get Roaring Lion beaten, and very nearly did. And he probably, you know, if he got injured, you know, half a furlong or a furlong before the finishing, well, then he might well have won. So they got everything right. The funny thing is that, you know, you look back to the Guineas and we all sit there and go, oh. If you backed him that day, you've got to consider yourself very lucky, haven't you? Because he beat Roaring Lion and Massar, and since the subsequent exploits have proven them to be better horse than him. But that's it. On that day, he was good. On that day, he had the draw. On that day, he got a perfect ride, as he did in the Racing Post Trophy. He's clearly an exceptionally good horse. And I don't think he's Alpha Centauri by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a top horse, and it'll be sad that he has to retire.
Indeed, here. We have plenty to review, so we're going to try and get through it as quick as we can. But let's start off with Kew Gardens' win in the St Leger. Tom, you've been a big fan of this horse for a while, and he justified that with a really nice win.
I wish I'd been a bigger fan and backed him on Saturday, Maddie, that's for sure. I mean, yes, I'm one of those people that as soon as these horses get short prices, I try and look elsewhere, and you know, 3-1 was a very big price. Yeah, he's a lovely horse. I'm still ruing the fact that he didn't make it to the King George when we were on at big prices, but there we go. I mean, he he was much the best. I thought they got the tactics spot on again. I think that's the key to when you've got so many runners that you can sacrifice, so many good horses like Ballydoyle do that you can sacrifice for your main choice, like they did in the Ledger. It makes it so much more difficult for the horses that are racing on their own, like Roaring Lion, who was able to do it. But Lati Dar, on the other hand, got sort of stuck behind Kew Gardens. If you'd have said before the race, how do you think Lati Dar could win? I would have said she would have been 3 lengths in front, going to 2 furlongs out, and everything had to try and catch her. As it turned around, it was the other way round. She had to catch Kew Gardens, and being by Dubawi out, her pedigree isn't of a 1 and 6 horse. Kew Gardens, we knew stays. It was as though they got the tactics muddled up a bit on Lati Dar, but nonetheless, Kew Gardens is an exceptionally good horse. I see him as being, at the moment, easily the best 3-year-old colt in Europe over middle distances. I mean, Roaring Lion exception. Roaring Lion doesn't stay a 1.5 miles, so I see no reason why he can't have a crack at the Arc and run well, whether he can beat Enable or Cracksman or Waldgeist, or whoever turns up. I'm not sure, any of the older horses, but he's pretty good. He's pretty good, and I think if you remember back to the King George, he wasn't that big a price to beat Poet's Word and Cracksman that day. I think it was 4 or 5 to 1. That tells you where he is, and I think he's better now. That was his best performance on Saturday. So he's in there with a shout. I would certainly be running him because they don't look like they've got anything else at Ballydoyle.
Yeah, I thought 12 to 1 was a shade big. Neil, how did everyone else react to Kew Gardens' win? What price is he for the Arc now?
Yeah, he's still 12 to 1. I'll run through the order, sure. Enables are Evans' favourite. Sea Class 5 to 1. Cracksman 7 to 1. Waldgeist after the win on the weekend is 8 to 1. Crystal Ocean and Kew Gardens 12 to 1 and 14 to 1 bar.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Jimmy, David Walters just touched on this on Twitter. He said, can Kew Gardens really go on to be a Gold Cup horse? And can you see him running over the Long Distance Cup at Ascot, a similar path to what Stradivarius took last year? What do you make of that?
Well, no, I agree with Tom. I think he'll probably go for the Arc this season. As Tom said, he hasn't really got anything else, Aidan, to go for that race. But yeah, he could certainly develop into a Gold Cup horse next season, just like Leading Light did. Aidan has a very good record with these 1.5 mile colts going on to prove really top quality Cup horses, as we know with Yates and Order of St George as well. So yeah, he'd have to be right at the top of your list for those races next season.
Yeah, we've talked about Saxon Warrior's run in the Irish Champion Stakes, but we have to talk about the winner, Roaring Lion, because I think he overcame a lot, whereas Tom's already mentioned the Saxon Warrior, the runner-up, he sort of everything went his way, but not so with Roaring Lion. But he's just an absolutely exceptional horse. To kick us off, Liam Britton says, where does Roaring Lion and Alpha Centauri's achievements, we've already touched on Alpha Centauri, rank along with recent greats, including Golden Horn, Enable, Found and Minding? Tom, I'll go to you first. Roaring Lion, how impressed were you with him?
He did exceptionally well, didn't he? Off a slow pace, out the back round Leopardstown. Quickening up like he did to catch a top-class horse like Saxon Warrior, injury or no injury, was a brilliant effort. Absolutely brilliant effort, because Ballydoyle completely stitched the race up for everything else, didn't they? And they got Roaring Lion last, Saxon Warrior second. He had to make up 3. It was a brilliant effort. It was a really, really top-class effort. I thought Turning for Home he had no chance. To get up as he did, I thought was one of the performances of the season. He's clearly outstanding, isn't he? Absolutely outstanding. I hate comparing horses from years because I think it's impossible to do. But if I'm putting a spin on it, I would say he's right up there with Golden Horn over 1.25 miles. He's right up there with all those horses that I've seen over 1.25 miles. I think the point about this year has been seen a changing of the guard, Maddie. Not that the O'Briens aren't still the best operation in the world, but we've seen the rise of Dubawi, the rise of Charlie Appleby, the rise of Kingman as a sire.
Oisin Murphy again.
Oisin Murphy. I think what we're seeing is we've had a period of about 10 years where Galileo especially has been such a standout star stallion that they've been able to dictate the way the flat racing is run, the one operation. They've had such monopoly on the whole way the flat racing scene is run that they've been able to sort out races for all their horses. They've got so many of them. Now I think we've got Dubawi's, Charlie Appleby and Kingman's coming along, and they're actually classier than the Galileos. They're not as tough, they don't stay as well, but they're classier. They remind me of the old days when we had Zaphonics and all those sort of really flashy miling type horses. And I think that's what's happened is we've seen John Gosden with his horses and Charlie Appleby and these Kingmans, and they're slightly better than the Galileos. They're not as strong as a Robust or as Stay as well, but they're better, and therefore we're getting a higher quality of horse. And I think Roaring Lion epitomises that. I think he's just quick, fast, brilliant, and it takes me back to the days when, there was such good competition among flat races. And I think it's great for the game that we've got all these fantastic horses around at the moment. I remember doing one of these with you, Maddie, about 5 or 6 weeks ago. We were lamenting how the lack of brilliant horses around. Well, now I think it's one of the best flat seasons I can remember. I cannot wait to see all these 2-year-olds and Roaring Lions and whatever run next time. I'm really enthused about it, and I think it's fantastic for the game.
So, Jimmy, you were just saying you agree with Tom that it's looking like a really tremendous flat season now after a bit of a rocky start.
Yeah, it took a while to get going, didn't it? I mean, we had Saxon Warrior winning the 2,000 guineas, which got us all excited at the start of the season. But then we had a bit of a lull thinking, well, maybe the 3-year-olds aren't that good. But then Alpha Centauri's come through, Roaring Lions come through, and all these 2-year-old colts have been coming through over the weekend. It's meaning the season is really finishing on a high. And hopefully we'll get some decent ground continuing over the next month. So we can get some proper top class racing.
More of those 2-year-olds later on, but Neil, I'll go back to you now. And what prices can we get on Roaring Lion for wherever he's going to go next?
So he's our 7-4 fav for the Kipco Champion Stakes, and also our 5-2 fav for the Breeders' Cup Turf. I'd echo exactly what the lads had said there. Even with Saxon Warrior, if you look back at the interview on RTE, O'Brien gave a really insightful interview about how much he thought of the horse, and actually sort of blamed himself for not winning more with him, and kind of said that he really was a miler, and that's what the trip he should have stuck with. He said Dunica and Anna were adamant he was a 1-mile horse, and really blamed himself for trying to turn him into a Triple Crown horse after Camelot got beaten those years back. On Roaring Lion, what Tom said about just the class, I think is really interesting. A lot of Galileos, they just grind out the wins, and they're sort of relentless gallopers, where Roaring Lion has that turn of foot. And the last kind of middle distance horse I could remember that had that sort of turn of foot was Sea the Stars, and it's just really visually impressive. I'd love to see actually the timings of the last furlong or two in his race at the weekends. Would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I thought exactly the same. But moving on to France now, because we had the Vermeil, the Foy and the Niel, all trials for the Arc. Kitesurf winning the Vermeil, Wildgeist, who we've already mentioned, winning the Pre-Foy, and Brundtland winning the Niel. He remains unbeaten. A highlight of those races from you, Jimmy?
I wasn't very impressed by any of the winners, really, in terms of possible Arc horses who could win the Arc. Kitesurf, I thought, was impressive in the manner that she stayed on. She never really travelled that well, and the Ballydoyle's tactics set the race up for her a bit. If you got soft ground in the Arc, I mean, she could be the most interesting runner for France. But really, apart from her, there doesn't really seem to be anything that gets you terribly excited that the locals have for the Arc. It looks like, I mean, I'd be very confident of a British success this year. I think the British have got a very strong team indeed, whereas the French, I mean, Waldgeist was impressive enough. He was cut after his Pre-Foy win, but I'm not sure the form was that special, and I expect 1 or 2 in behind to improve for the run. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a year for the French.
Yeah, okay. And Tom, over to you. Anything? I know Wildgeist was a horse you liked a few months back.
I backed Wildgeist at 33-1 for the Arc, so I'm a bit unlike Jimmy. While I agree that I find it hard to believe he'll beat Enable or Cracksman or Seer Class, I do think the form's okay, because if you take Talismanic's a Breeders' Cup winner, Cloth of Stars obviously was second in the race last year, second in the Arc last year, so that ties in with a few of the horses there. It might have been a little bit better performance than we gave it credit for. Andre Fabre has clearly trained all these horses for the Arc. So I don't think he's with a good draw, which I think is always important in the Arc. I could see him easily hitting the frame. But deep down, I think if it was soft ground, I agree with Jimmy. I think Kitesurf might be the sort of best French hope if they went very hard and turned it into a stamina sapping sort of soft ground Arc, then she'd come into it. But I think of those ones, as it stands, I think Waldgeist is the best, but do I think he'll beat Enable, Cracksman and Seer Class? I think he'll beat a couple of them, or maybe one of them, but I don't think he'll beat all of them.
Before we go over to Neil, just a few stats for you. Trev in 2013 was the last horse to win the Vermeer and the Arc in the same season. Rail-Link in 2006 was the last winner of the Prix Niel to follow up in the Arc. And Allez France in 1974 and Sagace in 84, the only winners of the Foy to follow up in the Arc. So that's something that Wildgeist has got to overcome. But Neil, what's your view on the Arc picture and any prices on some of the winners in France the weekend for the big race?
Yeah, so Wildgeist just seems to be improving the whole time. We've cut him into 8-1 now. Kite Surf won from a mile back. I just can't see, as the lads have alluded to, I can't see them getting near the top three if they all give their running. The one I thought for the future was Brundtland, who won the Niel Group 2. He's another Dubawi. That was only his second race and saw off Hunting Horn. Showed a lot of guts, but I mean, I said a lot when Doyle got off him and said that, you know, he's won on Sea Class and Poet's Word and they'd just be too strong, so I'm not even sure he'd go. I kind of just see it, if you look at the betting, as almost like a Premiership League table where you just have Enable is the City, Man City, if she runs to her best, she'll win. And you have Sea Class or Cracksman looking for second, and then it's just, there's a huge group of them there with Crystal Ocean, Poet's Word, Kew Gardens if the ground is good. They're all looking for third and fourth place, really.
It's worth pointing out, Maddie, though, isn't it? And Neil, while you're on there is some doubts about the ones at the top of the market, aren't there? Because I think Cracksman wants soft ground. I think Sea of Class wants fast ground. So that counts one of them out if it's either the other way. I think Enable, we're still, you know, it's only one run back, isn't it? It was a very good performance, but nonetheless, she has had injury problems. She has... Yeah. She was getting £8 from Crystal Ocean. She's even money now to win an Arc. It's not a price I'm especially want to rush in and take. I don't think any... Jimmy, would you rush in and take evens on Enable now? I don't think anyone would.
Certainly not.
Certainly not. See, Neil, I don't think you would either. So it is a race that has quite a nice each way feel to it, I think. It's just finding the one. Wallgeist around 8-1 is plenty short enough for me now. But I do think it's more punter friendly than maybe we've given it credit for.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. We're going to cover some other highlights from Irish Champions Weekend just after this.
Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is The Paddy Power, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather or the gym.
Welcome back to this Monday Postcast. Now, we've mentioned the very unfortunate retirement of Alpha Centauri, but take nothing away from the Matron Stakes winner Lawrence, who was, as always, very gutsy and very tough in the closing stages. Jimmy, I think they've said the Sun Chariot is going to be next for her, but I think, you know, perhaps she's not quite got the credit she deserves in a way for what she's done, because she had to come and bounce back from that run at York. Yeah,
actually, Alpha Centauri, who probably her injury occurred when she got that stumble, I didn't think Lawrence was necessarily beaten just before that, actually. I mean, she was really putting up a good fight against Alpha Centauri. So it was a great performance. She's so tough. I thought Danny Tudhope gave her a really good ride. Got his fractions absolutely spot on. And I think, you know, if Alpha Centauri hadn't got injured, she probably would have won for sure. But nevertheless, he really got the best out of Lawrence. And if she handles the track, I think she did in the Guineas, didn't she, at Newmarket, she's going to be tough to beat again in the Sun Chariot. She's having a great season.
She is. A big shame for PJ McDonald. He was there but not on board, of course, with his injury. So we wish him a speedy recovery. Tom, do you think, it's hard to say, isn't it, with the injury, but I sort of say when Alpha Centauri made that little stumble, I thought perhaps Lawrence might have had the race won anyway at that point. Is that fair?
Don't know. I read somewhere that Colin O'Donoghue said he was half a length up and then he took a stumble. That didn't look like that to me.
No.
Didn't look like that to me at all. What I would say, though, is the amazing thing about the weekend, I thought, is just how underrated Carl Burke is. Time, and do you know, in the last 3 years, he's had 9 Group 1 winners. William Haggis has had 4. Richard Hanners has had 3. Mark Johnson's had 2. Clive Cox has had 4. Michael Stout's had 7. Kai Brunchall's had 7. He's had 9 Group 1 winners, Carl Burke. He's had 20 Group winners from 72 runners. He is an absolute top-class operator, and he never gets the credit deserved. Havana Grey was another Group 1 winner for him on Saturday.
Yep.
We shouldn't sit here and be surprised that Lawrence is as good as she is, because in her trainer, she's got one of the best there is in Europe or anywhere in the world. And I think the more we forget about him, the more I'm going to keep backing him, because I think he's absolutely top class.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could disagree with that. Neil, have you got any prices on Lawrence for future targets?
Yeah, so we have her in at 9-4 for the Prix de l'Opera, but as you said, the owners have come out and the target's the Sun Chariot, which we don't have prices for yet.
Okie dokie. And what did you think of Alpha Centauri and Lawrence? Did you sort of think, well, Alpha would have won if she hadn't have been injured, or?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because Lawrence is such a game battler. Like she was probably the first off the bridle in the race, but as she's shown in all her previous races, she just battles on and only does enough to win. Obviously, everything went wrong in the Oaks where she's just too keen, but 1 mile is definitely her trip. I've mentioned this podcast before. I do have a soft spot for Clemmy, as she was great last year, but she ran a good race and actually looked like she might need a step up in trip. So I haven't fully given up on her yet. But,
yeah, she flew home.
Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned Havana Grey didn't look the strongest Group 1 beforehand, but he won it nevertheless, and it was a good performance.
Yeah, he's very fast, isn't he? Was unlucky, perhaps, in the Nunthorpe, wasn't he? He was drawn on his own on the far side, did all his running on his own. He still wasn't beaten very far. No reason why he can't keep on improving. It clearly wasn't the best race with 101 rated Sun Arrest in second and a few close up behind. But nonetheless, he's a Group 1 winner, and Carl Burke's another horse he's completely excelled with.
Yeah, and Jimmy, would you be looking at races like the Abbey or even in Breeders' Cup? Would Havana Grey be on your radar?
Yeah, for the Abbey, definitely. I mean, yes, he didn't beat any great horses in the Flying Fire, but I thought the way he did it really nicely. And I have said before, I don't think there is really that much difference between the top quality sprinters and those coming from out of handicaps. I mean, particularly over 5 furlongs, the margins are very small. I mean, whether we actually see him again, I'm not sure, because there has been some talk of him going to stud. Whether
really?
it will be, whether he'll have one more run, I don't know. But if he went for the Abbey, I think he'd have a good chance, particularly on fast ground.
Yeah, I don't know if plans have changed, but when I went up to see Lawrence and I asked Carl about Havana Grey, he sort of mapped out the whole season. He wanted to go everywhere, so it will be interesting to see if he does continue. Moving on, we'll talk about the 2-year-old races now. I know a lot of you are itching to talk about them. Let's start off with the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes, with Quarto followed in the footsteps of his dad. Tom, you've mentioned Dubawi and the sort of changing of the guard, and I thought it was interesting what was said about how they were one-paced, and this horse definitely wasn't. He you know, there was the steward's inquiry in the closing stages, but he's clearly made up into a very, very smart colt.
He's lovely, isn't he? He's lovely. Just everything about him, the way he travels, the way he quickens. He's very typical of his sire. He doesn't necessarily look that pre-proposing, and he sticks his head in the air a bit sometimes, but he's incredibly talented. I know we're going to talk about them all, but he's one of 4 or 5 2-year-olds that have got me really excited. And as I say, I love Ballydoyle. I think they've been brilliant for the game, and their breeding operation is second to none. But we've got a changing of the guard a little bit with these 2-year-olds, because none of them are theirs, and I'm really cannot... I mean, they'll undoubtedly be a factor in all the classics next year, because they always are. But we've got 4 or 5 super impressive horses from different angles, different strands of breeding, form, trainers, continents, not continents, but countries. And I think it's great. I think it's really good. I think it's what the flat game's needed. The jump game has sort of taken over a bit, I think, in terms of the affection of punters because of that, because there's such more variety in it. But I think now we've got all these horses, Quarto being right at the top of them, that could be exceptional, and it's been a real breath of fresh air for me as a flat racing lover. I think it's been really exciting.
And Jimmy, subsequent classic winners Churchill, Gleneagles, Dawn Approach, Power and Master Craftsman, all winning this race in the last decade. How does Quarto rank among the 2-year-olds we saw this weekend for you? Where is he?
Very, very close to the top. But it just shows you that the standard of 2-year-olds we've seen last weekend, that we've probably actually seen 1 or 2 better than Quarto. I was very impressed with him on Sunday, but there've just been some exceptional performances. So he might just come up against something that actually outclasses him, which is hard to believe because he has loads of ability looking at his performance at the Curragh.
Exciting to see how much they can improve coming forward. Neil, any prices on Quarto and some of the rest? We'll mention Too Darn Hot, Skitter Scatter, Mad Moon, horses like that. Can we get a roll call of the markets for next year?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off with the Derby. So Too Darn Hot's 4-1, Anthony Van Dyke 12s, Quarto 14s, Mad Moon 25s, and it's 33 bar. And then for the 2,000 guineas, we have Too Darn Hot at 7-2, 10 Sovereigns 7-1, Calix and Quarto 8-1, and Sangarius, who ran on Friday at 10-1.
Okay, and moving on now to the Champagne Stakes, won by Too Darn Hot. Tom, I know after the race you were impressed, but you weren't that impressed because you think you've got one that could beat him next year.
I was very, very impressed, Maddie. I mean, you couldn't fail not to be with the way he quickened up from 3-1 there. I mean, he's a sensationally good horse, isn't he? Both Sandown and there he showed something that very few horses can do. I'm not sure I've got anything can beat him. The only thing I'd say is that Johnny G has been a little bit reluctant to run him on fast ground, a little bit to run him on downhill tracks. I think it's a moot point, and it might not be anything. But the whole family have sort of tended to stay away from Newmarket. If you remember when Larty Dar won at the start of the season in the Pretty Polly or whatever race it was, they were at pains to say didn't like the track, didn't like the ground, didn't like all these sort of things. That's my only doubt about him. I think he's truly exceptional. But do I think he's I don't think he's as far ahead as about 3 or 4 others as the market would have you believe, despite being a truly, truly top-class 2-year-old.
Okay. Jimmy, Too Darn Hot, where does he rank for you?
I thought he was exceptional on Saturday. I put him right at the very top.
Number one?
Number one, yeah. I
mean,
mean, he looked like the Guineas winner to me on that performance. I thought he showed a blistering turn of foot. Really powerful the way he stayed on. I mean, there are concerns about the Guineas for him. Tom has just alluded to the ground. That could be an issue. The ground can get very quick on the Rowley Mile. And also, John Gosden doesn't have the best record in the Guineas. I mean, he's had some really good horses who actually been beaten in it, including Roaring Lion this season. So that is a concern. It could be that he ends up actually having a better chance of winning the Derby. I mean, you looking at him there, you think, well, he's all speed. But really, if you look at his breeding and you look at the way his sister stayed on in the St Leger, you'd have to give him a chance of staying the Derby trip. I mean, the ground will probably be more in his favour there as well. So he's got loads of options.
Okay, and quickly moving on to the Moyglare Stud Stakes, Skitter Scatter, who's been a really admirable filly, claimed her Group 1 under Roland Whelan. Great to see the jockey recording that first top flight success. Perhaps not as standout as some of the others, Neil, but still, you have to give her credit where it's due.
Yeah, she just continues to progress. Actually, Prendergast came out after the race and just talked about how she's tiny and has only begun to grow and is sort of getting very excited about the Guineas next year. She did hit a flat spot and quickened really well. I actually thought Lady Kaya as well was really eye-catching. I think dropping her back to 6 would be probably the way to go there. She travelled so well and just hit the front too soon. But yeah, definitely has a great shot for the Guineas next year. I'll actually run through the prices there. Pretty Pollyanna's 8-1, Just Wonderful 16s with Main Edition and Goddess. And we have Fairyland and Skitter Scatter and So Perfect all at 20s.
Okay, so just to round off this 2-year-old section, we'll give a mention to Madman Jimmy. How impressed were you with him? Because I again thought he was right at the top.
Yeah, no, I was really impressed with him too. He galloped on strongly. I thought he had a good horse in Broome behind him in second, who I thought ran much better than he had done at York. It was a good performance. And Guineas, Derby, I think probably a mile and a quarter will be his best trip for next season. He's got to be right up there as well. Whether we'll see him in a race like the 2000 Guineas, I don't know. I could expect him to be held back for the Irish 2000 Guineas next season. But he's very interesting. Sky's the limit with him too.
And Neil, you've got a really interesting market for those punters just looking ahead.
Yeah, so some of the guys downstairs threw together a specials market for the Europe's highest rated 3-year-old at the end of 2019. So obviously looking at all the 2-year-olds this year and who will end up the top rated in official ratings next year. So we have plenty priced up and you can send in any requests, but we have Too Darn Hot at 11-8, Quarto at 10-3, 10 Sovereigns at 5s with Calix, Sangarius at 9-1, Anthony Van Dyke at 20s, Persian King 33s and Mad Moon at 50s.
Okay, so before we move on for one horse for your Racing Post Tracker, I just want to clarify your favourite 2-year-old performance from this weekend and the horse you think is best at the moment. Jimmy, who's number 1 for you?
Oh, Too Darn Hot.
Too Darn Hot. Tom?
I think Too Darn Hot is the best one at the moment, but I love Quarto, and there's a horse, Maddie, that we haven't mentioned that ran in France.
Here we go.
On Saturday, who I absolutely love. I think he's the first horse I've seen that reminds me of Zaphonic. He's called Persian King. He's another by Kingman. He's trained by Andre Fabre. stick him in Google and watch him win at Chantilly. He's an absolute monster. He's huge, but he's so athletic. He's so just natural. I think he's an absolute superstar. Whether he obviously hasn't been in the same company as Corto or Toon Darn Hot or anything like that, but Andre Fabre says he's the best horse he's got, and I just think he's going to be really good. Whether he comes to England for the Guineas, I don't know, but I might be having a bit of Neil's 33-1 about him being the highest rated horse next year.
Yeah, you were happy that you were on him at a price after that Champagne Stakes. You're not pulling the wool over my eyes. Anyway, Neil, for you, who was the best?
Yeah, Too Darn Hot is the obvious one, but one of the big price there as well would be Mad Moon at 50-1. I thought he was seriously impressive.
Yeah, I love Mad Moon as well. Now, one horse to go in your Racing Post horse tracker, Jimmy.
Magnetic Charm, who finished fourth in the Mayhill Stakes.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yes, probably should have gone very close to winning with a clear run, and I think with a bit softer ground, I think she probably would have won. That was a career best for her. She seems to be making really good strides forward, and interesting to see how far up the rankings and for the fillies division she could go. I think the fillies division is really open. We saw with Skidder Scatter's race, although she was a good winner, I mean, it was still only 5 lengths back to the fifth, so there's very little between them. I don't think they're a bad bunch. I just don't think, apart from Pretty Pollyanna, that there isn't anything really sticking themselves out to be absolute superstars. So interesting to see how far she goes. I'm not going to say she's an Oaks winner or anything like that, but she could certainly be a group horse.
Yeah, I backed her and I was gutted with that. I think she was a bit luckless, and she was at Goodwood as well. So interesting to see how she does. Tom, Pretty Pollyanna, we've said week on week, we think we can't understand why she's still so big for the Guineas. Do you still stand by that?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to disprove that assertion yet, Maddie. I mean, there's plenty more races to come for the fillies, but normally we've seen the best fillies out by now. She's the better than. My tracker horse would be another filly, I Can Fly. I've lost more money on I Can Fly than many other horses in the history of horses, I would imagine. But I thought she was really good. I mean, as soon as I give up on her, she's back to where I thought she was. She won the Boomerang Stakes, the Group 2 on Leopardstown, and she won it in a much faster time than Mad Moon, a much faster time than Lawrence, and she did it from coming from last to first. Now, I haven't done the sectionals yet, and I'm waiting for the boys that do the sectionals, who are much, much cleverer than me, to tell me how fast she ran the last few furlongs, but she must have run it very fast, because she went from last to first very quickly and won it in great style. Now, she has to be Group 1 class on that. I would love to see her have a crack at maybe the Breeders' Cup Mile, or maybe the Breeders' Cup Fillies and Mares. I think she'd stay 1.25 miles, but she's getting good quickly, and I think she's up to taking on Lawrence and her pals now. Maybe the race at Newmarket's where she'll go, but I like her. I'd keep her in my tracker from now on.
Okay, Neil, I'm going to put you on the spot here and say any prices on I Can Fly for the future.
I've been furiously looking through the Breeders' Cup there, and I actually can't see her for the moment, sorry. Okay,
no worries. On a horse for your Racing Post tracker?
I really liked the run of Who's Steph, who ran in behind Azira on Saturday. She was off the track for over 110 days, ran a really nice race into second, and Dermot Well thinks a lot of Azira, who will be going for the Breeders' Cup Fillies and Mare with the Canadian EPT first. Just another thing I throw in there is Tony Martin's horses seem to have found a little bit of form, with Tudor City running second in the last race of the Curragh and Mouse Doctor running fourth in the first at Leopardstown. So definitely maybe a trainer to keep an eye on with some well handicapped horses.
Fantastic. We're going to have a look ahead to the weekend's action, a lightning quick look straight after this.
Check out Paddy's Rewards Club. Simply place 5 bets of £10 or more across any sport in a week, and you'll get a free £10 bet then next week. T&Cs apply. 18+. BeGambleAware.org.
Welcome back to this final instalment of the Monday Postcast. I'm joined by James Hill, Tom Siegel and Neil Ryan. The Air Gold Cup takes place on Saturday. Flaming Spear's currently the head of the market. Can we get any prices on this one, Neil?
So Urban Beat's actually just gone 10-1, Gunmetal 11-1. We have Glenmorey Lad, Flaming Spear and Growl at 12-1. Laugh a Minute, Mankib, Kulchari and Flying Pursuit of 14s and a 16-1 bar.
Okay, so plenty to get our teeth stuck into as usual. Jimmy, have you had a look at this race?
I have. It tends to be won by one of those higher up the weights, the Air Gold Cup these days, and a trainer who has a very good record in it is Kevin Ryan. And I quite like Hey Jonesy. I think he's been out of form a bit recently, but he didn't run that badly in Group 1 company last time in the Sprint Cup, trying to take on Harry Angel from the front. That was a bit of a thankless task, but he wasn't given too hard a time. I don't think he's too badly handicapped. On his days, he's quite a fast horse, and that's the sort of horse that tends to run quite well at air.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hey Jonesy, so we're agreeing again today. Tom, a selection from you.
Maddie, the Air Gold Cup without knowing the ground. What do we think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be very soft? I know it's soft now. I presume it will be quite testing up there by the time.
It was last year, wasn't it?
Or nearly always is. I think that counts against Gunmetal Ice. Glen Almoy lad ran no sort of race at the Curragh on Sunday. Oh, it's a hard one. As Jimmy said, Kevin Ryan and David O'Meara are the men that I normally look for in those type of races. I see Kevin's got the other horse, Major Jumbo, that I quite like as a horse for the race. But I thought maybe Alkawa for David O'Meara. But if the ground got very soft, he's by Fast Company. They like that. He ran quite well at the Curragh on Sunday in the Bold Lad there. But at the moment, until I see the ground and know what's going on, it's a really hard one.
Okay, Neil, a selection from you.
Yeah, so the price there in the two there, Hey Jonesy's 25s and Alkawa's 33s. The two I'd like, particularly if it's soft, would be Son of Rest if he runs. We've just put him in at 11-1. Ran obviously a blinder behind Havana Grey there in the Group 1, and actually would need the cut and ground, and the extra furlong would definitely suit. He came flying home at the end. You look back as well, he was placed in the Group 2 behind Caravaggio. The second one, who I seem to always mention every time I'm on this podcast, is Growl, who's obviously very difficult to win with, but again, the soft ground will suit and definitely has a good chance. So they'd be my two against the field.
Okay, and swiftly moving on over to Newbury, where the Mill Reef is the highlight. Aidan O'Brien's got so many entered here, 10 Sovereigns and Sergei Prokofiev amongst them. Jimmy, but who would you be most excited about at this stage in the race?
Looking at it, there isn't really anything there that you're getting that excited about. Sergei Prokofiev has been very disappointing. It could be a race just to sit back and watch here, because it doesn't look like the sort of race that punters have a good feel for. One interesting horse who's still entered, Garrus, who I quite fancied for the sales race at Doncaster last week. He looks like he's still in this. And it's a big step up for him, but he was so impressive when he won at Newcastle last time. They obviously hold him in quite high regard. I might have a little nibble on him each way if he does run. Okay,
no prices on this yet, Neil, but as our Irishman here, who can you see Aidan O'Brien sending over if I had to push you?
I have no clue. I don't know what he's thinking with Sergei Prokofiev, who just looks so talented at the start of the season. I possibly would be willing to give it one more go. I actually a real fan of Irish Rover. I still think just needs a really
mention Irish Rover. What was Ryan Moore doing?
I know.
Oh my God, he came on the telly, didn't he, Neil, and said what you can't do is take it up too soon. It's very windy out there, and decided to take it up 3 furlongs out, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He just needs a really strong pace and needs to be buried behind the pace and produce late. A bit like Sioux Nation, who was another disappointment at the weekend, who I won't get talking about. But the one that is slightly interesting if he goes is a horse called Decrypt for Toomey, who'd be sent over from Ireland. He actually beat Lady Kaya and Invincible Karma in his maiden. A lot was thought of it. It went off 6-4-5 that day. He's been off the track for 105 days, but I think he's definitely a group horse in the making.
And Tom, I'll give you the final word on this Mill Reef Stakes before we leave everyone.
Yeah, like Neil, I'm a big Irish Rover fan. Very disappointed he couldn't win the other day, but I also like a horse of John Gosden's, Cassar. He was very well backed to win the Mill Reef and came nearly the Windsor Castle, and came nearly last on his second start. But then he came out and won by 10 lengths, and he didn't like the soft ground at Ripon, but he won the Group 3 Sirenia last time by 2.5 lengths at Kempton. I think as long as the ground stays quick for him, I think Cassar is an interesting horse in that race, but a lot depends on what Aidan runs. Although, as we've pointed out already today, all his horses tend to lose more than they win, these 2-year-olds, aren't they? Sergei Prokofiev's won 2, lost 3. The Irish Rovers won 1, lost 5. So I'd prefer to take Cassar, probably.
Okay, and on that note, that should do us for today. Don't forget, if you enjoy these shows, please rate, review and subscribe wherever you're listening to us. Bruce will be back on Friday to preview all the weekend's action in Britain and Ireland. You can also catch our weekly golf and football postcasts, and don't miss our darts postcast on Wednesday, where we look ahead to the Champions League of Darts. Until next time, enjoy the racing, good luck with your betting, and goodbye.
Success ain't earned, it's bought. That's why at Paddy Power, we paid the big bucks for the best tech nerds in the world to develop our new, fastest ever app. Download the new app from the App Store or Play Store now. 18+, begambleaware.org.